This is Touchdown Song, a look at music and sports. I'm Tom Hedden. I spent 19 years writing music for NFL films. In this segment, we'll talk about the music that comes between the action. It's more than the seventh inning stretch. It's more than the Laker girls doing a couple of dance routines. It's the football halftime show. It's a tradition. It's an institution. What is halftime really? It's just a break so the teams can go and rest. But over the years at college and pro football stadiums around the country, it's become so much more. A chance for the fans to cheer. To dance. And to get up and shout. Like any institution, it's easy to think that the halftime show has always been there. But like everything, it had to start someplace.
It really all goes back to the University of Illinois.
Loris John Schissel works in the music division of the Library of Congress.
There was a conductor there, Albert Austin Harding, and he was really sort of the father of the quote-unquote concert band and marching band movement at the collegiate level.
Paris, Illinois native Albert Austin Harding enrolled in the fall of 1902. No one could have predicted the lasting impact the 22-year-old engineering major would have on the University of Illinois, and more importantly, the future of bands throughout the world.
Professor Harding was such a big deal that John Philip Sousa considered him to be the best band director in the country. And according to Earl Hurry, the former assistant director of the National Association for Music Education, it was Harding who was the first person to think about bringing a marching band onto the field at halftime.
The University of Illinois and the University of Chicago football game in 1907 was the first recorded ever event that was called a halftime show.
At that time, in 1907, college football was the only football game in town. There wouldn't be pro football until the NFL started in 1920, and even then, the pros had nothing that you'd call a halftime show. At halftime, people just got up and bought hot dogs. But that changed in 1937 when a man named George Preston Marshall took a pro team called the Boston Braves and moved them down south.
No Redskin movie is complete without a halftime show.
The Washington Redskins were the first NFL team ever to stage a halftime show, and boy was it wild.
Santa always comes to town at Redskin games. He lands at the 50-yard line in a helicopter.
George Preston Marshall was a showman.
Rod Barnes was the drum major in the Washington Redskins marching band for 55 years.
Well, Mr. Marshall was a showman, so that's what he wanted to do, is bring some little entertainment to the field during halftime.
There have been nimble-fingered baton twirlers. Here are some pretzel-muscled midget acrobats performing in midair.
He would get vaudeville acts come in, like Kate Smith, all the Animals, the Mummers.
Mummers band brought all the way from Philadelphia. This one here being the Polish-American band.
National Symphony Orchestra on the field. All kinds of acts from vaudeville.
And even an elephant or two. Put him up there and tackle.
But even with the elephants and jugglers, what Redskin fans, and the owner, liked most of all was the marching band.
George Preston Marshall, that was his baby, was the band. He found out there was a band at Chestnut Farms, Chevy Chase Dairy. He dressed them up like Indians and brought them up. It was a small band.
But then he added musicians from the vaudeville theaters downtown and singers from some local glee clubs, and the band just started to grow.
The halftime shows feature the famed 110-piece marching band.
But why a marching band? Why has that always been the thing that defines the halftime show? Loris John Schissel from the Library of Congress says it's really pretty practical.
This is before the advent of a public address system, before amplification of sound. So the wind band or the brass band or whichever is in and of itself able to be heard outside, over large spaces.
And there's something else. Unlike any other kind of band, like a rock band or an orchestra, the thing about a marching band is it moves. You can go back thousands of years, and that's what marching bands have always been good for.
It's music meant to move people around or to get a group of people like troops or a procession of nobles or the Pope to get them from point A to point B effectively and with grace and theater about it.
When bands first started coming out on the field, just being there was enough. Dr. Julian White is the director of bands at Florida A&M University.
In the early days, those were the paramilitary bands. And so here we have the bands, they play in the stands, and then we said, okay, we're going to go on the field. We're going to march. And they did the military drills and this kind of thing.
After a while, though, someone decided to do more, something fancier than a military drill. And again, the change came from the University of Illinois.
He came to Illinois in 1934, and as director of the Marching Illini, Hinesley devised intricate halftime drills considered revolutionary at the time.
Mark Hinesley, who succeeded Professor Harding as head of the Illinois band, looked at the football field, and Lawrence John Schissel says he figured something out.
The gridiron, or a football field, works out very easy as far as moving people in different ways, basically because you have 5-yard lines, and traditionally a band always marches 8 steps per 5 yards on the football field. So basically with the field laid out like a grid that way, you could start designing quote-unquote formations out on the football field.
Mark Hinesley on the left, head of the band department, shows the hard work in glamorizing the Saturday game.
Today there are universities with long traditions of bands marching in formation, places like Ohio State.
The band goes into what they call script Ohio, and that's where they write out Ohio in cursive on the football field, and the great honor of anyone in the marching band is to be the sousaphone player to come out and dot the I on script Ohio.
If you watch a band like Ohio State, you'll see that they perform in a particular style. It's a style named after the football conference where it first caught on. Big Ten-style marching is what it's called. Here's Earl Hurry of the National Association for Music Education to explain.
It's the drum major with the mace and the tall Busby fur hat. It's the leaning back, high-energy Ohio State University-type marching band, Michigan. One of the things they do very famous, the drum major runs onto the field in front of the band and does a flip. That's known as the Big Ten style.
But it's not just the uniform that sets the Big Ten style apart. Lawrence John Schissel says they also march in a special way.
The Big Ten style is characterized by bringing your feet up off the ground quite high. And it's almost, I don't want to say a prance because that sounds kind of silly, but it is a different style of marching where you literally bring your knee up so that it's almost perpendicular to the ground.
Big Ten has been the most popular style for years, but lately it's had competition. Competition that's come not from colleges, but from high schools. You're listening to the Blue Devils from Concord, California. They're the most successful of what's called the core style bands.
Their uniforms are characterized in sort of, they almost look like, I want to say Spanish, sort of usually with a cowboy hat type thing with the side up and sashes and things. And it's just they also what we call glide step, and that means they just bring the foot up slightly off the ground and move it and bring it down again.
Core bands are very competitive. They hold meets all over the country where bands face off to see who can play the loudest and who has the flashiest moves. But Big Ten and core style aren't the only flavors out there.
There are probably as many different kinds of styles as there are marching bands.
There's a British style that's popular in parts of California. There's a military style that's big in Texas. And in the Southeast, there's the HBCU style. That comes out of the country's historically black colleges and universities. Here again is HBCU band leader Julian White from Florida A&M.
We go back to our African roots. That rhythm, driving rhythms, were the force in creating energy.
If you saw the 2002 movie Drumline, that's HBCU style. Flashy steps, dance steps, the marchers swing their instruments in the air when they move, and the biggest thing, the HBCU style relies more than anything else on drums.
The drummer and the cymbals and bass drum would employ 1, 2, 3, 4, D, 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 D. And so those kind of flam accents that we call them on 1 and 3 gives that drive. And we change that beat, it gives a kind of a rock feel, a kind of a jazz rock feel. 1, 2, 3, 4.
A lot of the things we're telling you about band might be familiar because chances are good there's a band at your school. You might even be in it. So here's another question like the one we asked about halftime. When did they decide to start teaching band at school? Again, you might think it's always been there, but it hasn't.
The high school marching band programs really started around the time of World War I.
Again, Earl Hurry of the National Association for Music Education.
The steel mills and the auto plants and what have you would have company bands. And then from there, those parents wanted to see their kids get involved in music. Then there was also an influx of instrumental manufacturers in America that started building up after World War I.
Those instrument manufacturers had made a lot of money during the war, outfitting military bands. And according to Loris John Schissel,
when the war was over, they realized, how are we going to keep this profit going?
He's a music man.
He's a what? He's a what?
He's a music man, and he sells clarinets to the kids in the town with the big trombones. And
why don't we send our people out, our salesmen out, and organize bands in each community and then sell them the musical instruments?
Well, I don't know much about bands, but I do know you can't make a living selling big trombones, no, sir.
If you've ever seen the play or the movie, The Music Man, that's what they were spoofing.
Particularly the con company in Indiana that sent out this gentleman named Lynn Sams, who went from town to town to town, organizing school bands and then saying, well, you're going to have so many trumpets, so many tubas, so many drums, that sort of thing.
Please observe me, if you will. I'm Professor Harold Hill, and I'm here to organize a River City Boys band. Oh, think, my friends, how can any pool table ever hope to compete with a gold trombone? Ra-ra, ra-da-da-da-da-ra-ra.
And even in the Depression, the old quote that you used to see for kids going into music was, teach a kid to blow a horn and he'll never learn to blow a safe.
76 trombones led the big parade.
And according to Earl Hurry of the National Association for Music Education, what better place is there for someone to make music than in a band?
If you're on a football team and you're not one of the best 25 players, you spend most of your time during the game sitting on the bench. When you're in the band and you're the last chair clarinet player, you play every quarter of every minute of the game, so to speak.
So the next time there's a break between halves, whether you're in the stands or out on the field, enjoy halftime. It's one of the best pieces of entertainment America ever invented. Thanks for listening. I'm Tom Hedden for Arts Edge, a program of the Education Department of the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts.